Alright, here's a comprehensive video on how to test a throttle position sensor. Pretty easy to do. You'll only need a few tools like a multimeter and a throttle position sensor. If you're going to change it, then you'll need the corresponding drivers, like in this case a star bit. Alright, first things first, we're going to cycle the key on so that the battery is giving voltage to our throttle position sensor. We're going to go ahead, pop the hood, get under there and locate what we're working on. Okay, not endorsing any brands here, but let's go ahead and grab that multimeter. To do this, we have to establish a couple of things. The first is a known good ground. So we're going to turn our multimeter on, and we're going to test the battery voltage, and then we're going to find a good ground that we can test off of. Alright, so here we'll just probe into the terminals of the battery with the multimeter and get the exact voltage that the battery is reading. Then we'll make sure we can find that same exact voltage on a ground closer to the throttle position sensor for ease of working. So here we will test on the intake manifold. We'll just probe the positive terminal on the battery and put the ground on the intake, and it's the same exact voltage, so we're good to go. We know that is a good ground. Okay, here what I'm going to do is just wedge that negative probe up against the intake manifold. That way it sits there and I don't have to deal with it. So what we're going to do here is test the 3 wires on the throttle position sensor. There's a ground, there is a 5-volt feed, and then there is a 5-volt as well that the meter takes, that the position sensor takes and drops down in voltage depending on what the position of the throttle is. So we probe 1 and we will cycle the throttle to see if it changes. In this case it doesn't. In this case I know the middle wire is the feed, so we're going to test the other outside, and that doesn't move with the throttle. So here we are on the throttle position feed wire, and it's also not moving, but our throttle is reading wide open. So 4.7 volts, almost 5 volts, and it's not changing when we cycle that throttle. So that tells us that our throttle position sensor is bad, reading wide open throttle. In a lot of cars they have a clear flood mode where if the throttle is wide open it won't start the car, so it won't give spark or gas to the engine, and it's kind of a test setting. So what we'll do is just remove that throttle position sensor. Just a couple of screws holding it in. There we go. Give it a visual inspection, see if everything looks alright. In this case it was a brand new throttle position sensor, so it should be working. That's the problem with some sensors aftermarkets nowadays, is the sensor comes right out of the box not working, so then you think you've got a problem with your computer. So it's really important sometimes to just test everything and make sure that you know what's going on. Okay, so when we put that new sensor in, we're just going to make sure that it lines up correctly according to the way that the throttle lines up. If you stick it in between, it won't engage the position sensor. So you have to put that little notch on the throttle into the correct spot on that throttle position sensor. It's pretty intuitive. Okay, so we're just going to put those new screws in. In this case, the sensor came with new screws, so we'll just replace the hardware with it as well. We'll just give ourselves some time to get that all seated down correctly, and then we'll test to make sure that this one operates as it's supposed to. Okay, we'll just tighten that down here with our hex key. Just a simple little wrench like this. Alright, we'll plug everything back in. Unplugged a couple of accessories to access that better for removal and testing. So we'll just make sure everything's back in its place. We'll give it a test. So we're on our ground here. Looks good. Feed wire, good. And then here's our sensor feed. So what we'll do is you want to put that probe into that wire, back probe it, whichever method you prefer. And then you cycle that throttle, and you want to do it slowly if you're using a multimeter to see that number dial up. You don't want it to ever skip or jump down for any reason. You want it to be a steady increase in that number of voltage that it's sending out to the computer. And then vice versa on the way back down. You want it to just be a smooth number counting down. You don't want it to jump from 1 to 4 or anything like that. Just a smooth number up, smooth number down. In this case, as you can see, our sensor's working flawlessly, so we have got this problem sorted out. So again, it's important just to test everything. Make sure you don't go and throw some money at a computer and then realize you still have a problem and just junk the car. So just test some things. Your throttle position sensor is easy to test, good to go. So side-by-side view of the old and new. That's how you change and test a throttle position sensor. Thanks for joining and enjoy the video.